and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. And today is my favorite video of the year slash like beginning of the new year, because I do these typically in January, but it is my 2022 favorite books. I am so excited to talk about the books that I thought were top tier in the year of 2022, the year that I read them, and I thought that I would share them with you. So for this video, there are no honorable mentions. I had a pretty mid-year in 2022. I read a ton of like 3 stars. I read some that I could squeak to 4, but it wasn't really quite a 4, and I read some that were 3 that it might have been actually a 2. So I didn't read a ton of like books that blew my mind, but the ones that I really loved and had really good discussions on were the ones that tended to be on this list. So without further ado, let's just jump into my 5 favorite books of 2022. At number 5, I have The Last Laugh by Mindy McGinnis. This is the sequel and final book in the Initial Insult duology. So given that this is a direct sequel and you really do need to read the first one, I'll just kind of paraphrase the first book, which is The Initial Insult. The Initial Insult follows Tress Montour and Felicity Tornado in a small town that is a bit like the cast of Amontillado. So if you don't know that short story, then this might not make full sense, but there's a lot of elements of a cast of Amontillado that are in this book. Felicity and Tress used to be best friends, but when Tress's parents die mysteriously and Felicity is the last one to have seen them alive, Tress believes that Felicity had something, or at least knows something more about her parents' disappearance. And this is a small town, so there are a lot of secrets and a lot of political moves at play, and it is a very suspenseful and action-filled book slash duology. And this book was no exception. There was a lot of crazy turns that came in this book as well, and it was overall a great series. The audiobooks for both are excellent. The physical books are wonderful. And if you're looking for a high-stakes, twisty-turny young adult suspense thriller, I really think you need to read this one. Mindy McGinnis is a wonderful author, and I think she is slept on a lot of her books, but her like thriller suspense novels are definitely where her talent lies. At number 4, I have Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is a light sci-fi fantasy book. Into the Drowning Deep follows a cast of characters who are setting out on an exploration, which is kind of like a parody film of like something you might see on the Discovery Channel. So it is a mockumentary where they're trying to find if mermaids are real. And they go into the Mariana Trench, and there's mostly a lot of actors. There's people who play like the mermaids, and there are the cast and crew, and everything is set up to be kind of like a fake documentary where they find proof of mermaids, except that this time around this is their second voyage. In the first voyage, one of the main characters' sister was on the voyage, and the entire cast and crew disappeared and were never heard from again. So it's been a bit of speculation about what happened in sea, and people speculate whether or not there was real mermaids at play or if it was all just a show to amp up drama around this documentary. So now the main character and a new set of cast and crew are set out to retrace the steps and find out what really happened to the original cast and crew. And truthfully, I really liked this book. I listened to it on audio as well, and I highly recommend the audiobook experience. It's really good. But I felt like even though it was a slower paced book, it was intriguing. Like the author kind of kept you aligned, and as things started getting more suspenseful and things kept amping up, so did the pace of the writing, and I felt like it fit very well. It felt like almost listening to like a documentary or like a podcast or something as we were following these people, and then as things started picking up. So I don't know, I really liked it. I love Mira Grant. Mira Grant is also another name for Shauna McGuire. And so far, I've really loved everything I've read from her, whether it's her pen name or her real name. And I would definitely recommend this if you are interested in like mermaid books slash like bit of like mystery thriller vibes. At number 3, I have A Lesson in Inventions by Victoria Lee. This book I read for one of my book clubs, and this went over so well. There was not a lot of us in the discussion, but the majority of the people in the conversation took away that this book has an unreliable narrator who is quite off her rocker due to probably a lot of traumatic things that happened in her life. This book follows Felicity Morrow, who goes to an all-girls academy called the Dalloway School. And there, she was one of the elite people who got to stay in this old house, and only 5 girls could stay in there from the upper class. And while she was doing her senior year, the first time around, her best friend slash girlfriend ended up dying. And because of that, this sent her into a spiral where she went away to get help and then returned to the school to stay in the same home after a year to start the new school year. So this is her second time being a senior. She never graduated the first time, and now she's living in the same home where her girlfriend died. And there's a lot of creepy things going on. Felicity believes that, you know, while they were doing all this research on the Dalloway 5, these girls who were assumed to be witches and were conjuring evil spirits in this house many, many years before, Felicity believes that when her girlfriend was looking into these to do her thesis paper, she accidentally conjured these spirits, and now they're trying to kill all the girls in the home. And it's a really good novel for like suspense, wondering like what's going to happen next. Is it paranormal? Is it all in her head? Is there something else at play here? Like what's going on? And I was kept on my toes the entire time. I thought the mental health aspect was done really well, and the author does have a PhD in psychology, so I think that comes into play quite a lot while reading this book. And overall, it was just a very fun ride. I was not sure what to expect at any point, and I really just enjoyed it. I've not read anything else by this author, but this book kind of makes me want to see where she's going to go next. And also, I really hope she ends up writing an adult book, because this could have towed the line and maybe even gone a little bit darker had it been an adult. At number 2, I have A Diary of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This book came in one of my Fairy Loot adult subscription boxes, and I had no idea what to expect other than it was pitched as like Dracula's brides and polyamory and some trauma-based information. As you could probably see, I have every single book I think on this list has some kind of trauma base. What is wrong with me? But this is no exception. So this book follows Constanza, and she is the supposed first wife of Dracula, and she gets turned into a vampire, and it follows her life and her life with him throughout many decades, as well as they keep adding people into their little family. So Dracula has many brides, but obviously to try to keep appearances as they move from town to town, he introduces Constanza as his wife, the next woman as his ward, then like someone that he like adopted. Like it's just like they keep growing and making names, but they're all technically together. And it's a very, very slow character study about what happens when people in power, aka Dracula, who is very old, very ancient, and basically is telling them all the information they know about being a vampire, and they only know what he's telling them. So living a life kind of in fear, having this new ability but not really sure how to do it, like he has a lot of control over them. And as the book keeps going on, there's more and more darker themes that keep being introduced, and what he'll do or what lengths he might go to, like the threat that's there, in order to keep them in line. So this book really does have a very large trauma focus and an abuse of power situation. So again, maybe some trigger warnings for this as far as abusive relationships and domestic violence, but I definitely really like it, and I loved how paced the book was. Now, some of my friends that read this with me thought this was incredibly boring, and it might just not be their book, but for me, I really did, devour this book, pun intended, but I really loved it. I thought the polyamory was done well, but also noting that in this specific relationship, it was abusive, unlike with Dracula being like the powerful one and kind of controlling all of them. So like I really loved the relationships that they formed with each other and how they all like had different dynamics with Dracula. It was just done really well, and I would love to see what else this author comes out with in the future. And at number 1, I have Juniper and Thorne by Ava Reed. This book has been on my mind since I read it, and I'm so happy that I did this year. After seeing someone else's recommendation, I knew I just had to jump into it, and it was wonderful. This is a fantasy that also has a lot of hard-hitting topics in it, and it completely blew me away, from the really beautiful writing to the depths and the little nuances of the harder topics that the author explores, as well as just the plot and the general intrigue of the story and the fantastical world she created. Juniper and Thorne follows the main character Marlinchen and her two sisters, who are all three witches, and they live under their father's rule, who was known as like one of the last wizards in the little town that they live in. However, their father has pretty much spent all of their money, and everything in their house and their home is cursed since their mother died. So they live under their father's house and literally his rule. He is very strict. He causes a lot of trauma to the girls, and they all develop certain coping mechanisms in order to survive his wrath. And one night, Marlinchen's two older sisters sneak out, and they're all in their 20s at this point, so they are all adults, but they sneak out to kind of go view like the ballet, and Marlinchen tags along. But unfortunately, this causes problems because their father discovers that Marlinchen went out and then bans all of them from going back out to the town. However, Marlinchen found that she kind of had a piqued interest with one of the actors, and they start to have some trysts in the neighborhood, and both of them tend to bond over their similar traumas that they experienced, and it ends up being their journey as they are trying to heal and grow and leave the people that are abusing them. So overall, it definitely combines two of my, I don't want to say favorite, because reading about trauma is not like a favorite of mine, but I really like when people do it really well, and it has a lot to offer. So I really loved that aspect, as well as like being in a fantasy world and seeing how it relates to magical components. I read another book that had this in it, and I think it was before I joined other two, but if you guys are interested, I could definitely make a list of like books that have trauma done really well in them, if anyone ever wants it, because Juniper and Thorne would definitely be on that list. Of course, there are definitely triggers to this with like trauma, abuse, and I would just be wary, look them up before you go into them. I can't remember anything else specifically off the top of my head, but there might be some other ones, like I think eating disorders was another one. So if you are iffy on whether or not this might be a book for you, Goodreads or in general, you can also go to booktriggerwarnings.com. I'll leave the link down below, and you can search to see if the book that you're interested in has anything specifically triggering in it. And those are my top 5 books of 2022. As I said, as I'm recalling this and I'm talking about them, every single book has some kind of trauma feature in it, whether it's like blatantly in your face, or there's like a heavy mental health component, or there's like grief and loss in there. Every single one of them is pretty messed up. So go into this knowing that if you're going to pick these books up, please definitely check trigger warnings. I didn't think about this until I was making this list, but apparently these are the books that really like sold me this year. Maybe it's because my 2022 was pretty rough and terrible in a lot of places, and I just needed something to understand too. I don't know, but I can't talk about these books enough. They're all excellent in some certain way. They all have like thriller aspects, and they also have like some fantastical aspects. Not all of them, but most of them. So if you're looking for something to read in 2023, I'd recommend picking up one of these. And there you have it, my favorite books of 2022. Let me know down below what was your favorite book of the year, and if you have any recommendations for me to read in 2023. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.